chambers and step pyramids that were built in the 3rd millennium before Christ. These are said to be among the oldest stone buildings in the world.
Mind to sit here?
Archaeologist Dr. Okasha Aldali is my guide. He was about to reveal the most astonishing story of my journey so far. Like most people, I believed that Egyptian hieroglyphs had remained completely undeciphered until the 19th century. Then came the chance discovery of the famous Rosetta Stone. This stone had the same inscription written in both hieroglyphs and Greek. It provided the crucial clues which British and French scholars used to decipher the writings of ancient Egypt. That's the usual story one hears, but Dr. Aldali has made a discovery that dramatically alters it. He has recently unearthed a number of rare works by the Islamic scholar Ibn Wahshiyya. What he did was figure out a correspondence between hieroglyphs like these and letters in the Arabic alphabet.
If you look here, for example, at Ibn Wahshiyya's manuscript, you see he is giving us the Egyptian hieroglyphic signs that have phonetic value underneath. Yes, and they have the phonetic value in Arabic underneath. So look very carefully at this one. It says seen underneath that seat. Yeah. Now look at this seat here. That is S. That seat in Egyptian hieroglyphic is used for the sign X, seen, which is what you see here, seen. That is the name of the god Osiris. Osiris. That's the seen. This is the letter H. This one here. Ha. The water wave is the letter N, or Noon in Arabic. T and the letter S. These are all letters. These are all letters.
But how did he decipher the hieroglyphs?
The one good thing about the early Arab scholars was their ability to link ancient Egyptian language, we call hieroglyphics, to link it with their own contemporary Coptic. They realized that Coptic is nothing but the later stage of ancient Egyptian language.
And they realized this because the translation movement had literally placed hundreds of Coptic texts into their hands. The scholars could now see a direct link between hieroglyphs and Arabic. What fraction of these symbols would have been correctly deciphered?
They got about 14 letters. They got more than half of the Egyptian hieroglyphic correctly. So that was a remarkable achievement for people in the 9th century, 10th century.
Well, that's probably the biggest revelation for me so far on my travels, that Egyptology didn't begin in the 19th century. Yet again, it seems that Islamic scholars actually cracked hieroglyphics, and they cracked it for strange reasons. They cracked it because they were interested in astrology and alchemy. But here is another example of this amazing translation movement. They weren't just translating Greek and Indian and Persian texts, they were translating Egyptian hieroglyphics as well. Absolutely incredible. Unfortunately for the Caliph al-Ma'mun, the hieroglyphs contained no alchemical secrets. But what this story reveals to me is the insatiable curiosity Islamic scholars had about the world. They were desperate to absorb knowledge from all cultures purely on merit, with no qualms about the places or religions from which it came.
Most intellectual traditions, including, if I may say so, our own, tend to work very hard to keep everybody else out. Whereas here we have an example of an enterprise which is desperate, curious, to turn itself into a net importer of intellectual product. And that's a very important lesson for the history of the sciences.
I was soon to see just how dramatically this fueled scientific innovation. But it's worth remembering that the translation movement wasn't just about science and medicine. As the capital Baghdad sat in the center of a vast, successful empire, it became home to an extraordinary flourishing of all kinds of culture. this is the time described by 1001 Nights, of great and generous caliphs, magic carpets, great journeys, but also ambitious buildings, music, dance, storytellers, and the arts. Baghdad was such a cultured and vibrant city that one traveller of the time wrote, "There is none more learned than their scholars, more cogent than their theologians, more poetic than their poets, or more reckless than their rakes." It really must have felt like Baghdad and the Arabic Empire were the world leaders in civilization and culture. To be part of that city's growing intellectual elite must have been as exciting as it gets.
It was a new Muslim city. It only started to be built in 756. So it has that sort of sense of almost being on a frontier, of being something new, of being something different. It was full of courtiers, it was full of sort of nouveau riche individuals who were trying to make their way at the Abbasid court. And it is the sort of a place, if you like, where innovation is valued and appreciated.
At the heart of the city's intellectual life was a system called the Majlis. Now, the word Majlis could probably best be translated as salon or talking house. In 9th century Baghdad, what this meant was that the city's elite, the caliph, his courtiers, generals, and the aristocracy, would hold regular meetings, you might call them seminars or discussions, during which the city's cleverest men, the philosophers, theologians, astronomers, and logicians, would gather to discuss and debate their ideas.
It was not the case that people were expected to adhere to a particular line or adopt a particular religion. They were allowed to express their own sentiments and their own views very freely. The point was that they should do so in elegant Arabic and a good logical reasoning.
The effect of the Majlis was to create a heady mix of money and brains, with the best minds in the empire swapping ideas while simultaneously engaged in fierce competition for patronage. It's at this point my investigation into the first wave of Islamic science returns me to the man we first met at the beginning of this story in the back streets of Cairo, the great mathematician who brought the West the decimal system. Out of the very heart of this intellectual whirlwind came Al-Khwarizmi, mathematician, astronomer, courtier, and favourite of the Caliph Al-Ma'mun, who was a product of his age, an emigre from eastern Persia into Baghdad, surrounded by books, well-versed in learning from Greece, Persia, India, and China, and fearless in his thinking. Al-Khwarizmi brought together two very different mathematical traditions and synthesized them into something new.
The capacity to have on your desk simultaneously